tossers have thrown it out the door with their behaviour this week. They should be ashamed of themselves. They should absolutely look at themselves in the mirror and wonder what the have they been doing. They're hissing at us and calling us cheats in the Lord's long room, and they have the gall to say, talk to us about the spirit of cricket. Absolute bullshit. There's a big appeal that's hit him on the pad. He's out. Lions gone. New South Wales are 9 down onto Sydney Road, and it's hit a car. Oh, I think it's hit a car. What a way to bring up your 50.
All you want is to leave it all behind. Now there is a simple remedy to stay fit for all eternity.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cricket Unfiltered podcast. I am Manners, and Australia have taken control of the third test. They were bowled out for 445. They have reduced India to 4 for 51. They are in total command of this third test, but it seems like rain will be the determining factor. Not much play was possible on the third afternoon, and it seems that India will get out of this one and head to the MCG with the series of 1-1. Joining me from the Emerging Cricket Podcast, friend of the show, Daniel Beswick. Daniel, welcome back. A frustrating day. I think they went off, half a dozen times. Very frustrating.
Man, it's first of all, before we get into it, I think that's the first time I've been on the show where you've had the intro, and I feel like I've been punched in the mouth. The weather, the weather, of course, made it.
In what way?
Oh, just a lot of bleeps and an aggressive manners. I know that's the mad manners that you are, well, always portraying, because that's just who you are. But after sort of being on the opposite end of it, just listening to it, I'm taking a little bit aback, if I'm honest. Especially after the sort of tame
guilty conscience,
the tame effort of the weather gods today, not really helping us imbibe cricketing action. But not before, as you say, Australia really taking control of this test. We're now in a little bit of a race against time from an Australian point of view. I know the best part of 2 days, hopefully weather-free, you'd think would be enough time. But I think we're at the mercy of the elements at this point. It's Australia against the weather in Brisbane, unfortunately. Yeah.
And with Sydney to come, maybe weather could be quite a determining factor in who gets to hold up the Border Gavaskar Trophy at the end of this series. I want to go through all the day's play, but I just wanted to touch on an issue that actually I didn't talk about on yesterday's day 2 wrap. It escaped me, this controversy. So, friend of the show, Isha Guha, had used a word on commentary calling Jasprit Bumrah the most valuable primate, and then she was then torn apart online. Channel 7 just started the news, basically started the sports news with basically saying that racism has overshadowed day 2 of the Gabba test. I've never heard such a beat up in my whole life. I'm not sure if people use dictionaries anymore, but primate actually means human. So I don't know if it was particularly great use of words, but I don't think there was any insult, any sort of anything other than meant to be what it was meant to be, which is Jasprit Bumrah is an incredible bowler. So I thought this was a beat up. So Isha Guha has come out on day 3 and apologized for using that language. She apologized for the fact that it was taken the wrong way. I think people are conferring that word with other words that have a lot more racist connotations. And I think, therefore, they were sort of brought together, and somehow Isha Guha has ended up in hot water. But the definition of primate is human. That's what she was saying. And, maybe the language was, she needs to dumb her commentary down a bit for those morons out there, because that, to me, especially coming from a woman of color, I don't know how you could interpret that to be racist.
To be honest, I hold a slightly more dim view about it, only because I think we just know when you put in that position, it's important for you to convey your point effectively across to your audience. And I think, language is a funny thing. I mean, that definition, while it does sort of include humans in it, I think there's connotations around that particular word, and it's about the social construct of what that word is. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I personally, when I heard it, I was a little bit taken aback, just because I think you should know when you're in that position, as Isha is, under such scrutiny, that you have to be incredibly careful. And as someone, right now, as we are speaking in microphones, I know sometimes you kind of lose your stream of consciousness a little bit, but it just seemed so deliberate, and I just thought it was probably a poor application of language in that particular case. The apology was, I think, very genuine. I think she put her hand up and apologized for what went on. It was interesting they had Ravi there in the conversation as well, and he was kind of the conduit between her and the Indian team, and he basically said, look, they haven't sort of really processed it in their way until the end of the test match anyway. I just think it was a little bit clumsy. I mean, I don't think it'll end up being much more than what we've already got. I just think it's one of those things where it kind of challenges who we are and what we are. And in some ways, I think it's a good thing that it was flagged as something to be talked about and stressed and looked at a little bit more, because I think, in the time and place that we're in, I think we should be quite strenuous in how we do scrutinize ourselves and in the world that we live in at the moment. So yeah, look, I don't think it was particularly great. I don't think I go as far down your direction, Manners. I think there's definitely some balance to this, but I definitely think it all could have been handled better, nipped in the bud straight away, and made into less of a story than what it became.
Yeah, and I do think she will not use that word again because of the trouble she's got in about it. But I just think it was a mountain out of a molehill. I'm on Wikipedia now. There are 500 species of primates. Humans are one of them. Like, I don't think she, in fact, she's probably too smart for the audience, because it's a very specific word. And I guess, if you, I have to take into account, maybe some people take it as meaning something else. And it's probably not a word anybody's ever heard used on a cricket commentary platform before. So it sort of came out of nowhere.
It's more the fact that you're lumping people in with a wider group of beings when, for so long we're trying to remove ourselves from the animal kingdom and being different to everyone and everything else as well. I think that's where it kind of stems from. But yeah, I just don't think it was. Sometimes even by trying to be too far ahead and too far above, you end up just being pulled back down with everyone else anyway. So yeah, look, it's all about kind of the audience that your target demographics and your audiences that you're talking to. So I don't know, maybe in that regard that there might be some sort of inner thought and just reflection on what she said.
Yeah, but I just do not think it was a racism furor. I think it was a beat up. I think she was kind of victimized, and I don't like the reaction that came to her, because in the end, was it good commentary? No. Was it offensive commentary? I don't think it was. Was it a poor choice of words? Maybe, but I think you have to look at the definition and just think there's no way Ishigua was meaning anything, was even remotely alleging what people were saying she was meaning. All right. Well, didn't think there'd be a racism controversy coming from Ishigua, that's for sure. Anyway, it's all over now. She's apologized. She sucked it up, and that's the best thing she can do. And I think the fact that she's got such a great track record of covering the game with such skill means that this will go away, and hopefully nothing like this will happen again to her. But yeah, I feel sorry for her. I thought that was just, and it did feel to me like Channel 7 were trying to score points against, Fox, who also provide cricket coverage. It was a good way of them to just try and turn their nose up at Fox. So it was all pretty unedifying. All right, let's get to the cricket. So Australia started today, at 7 down, and then they batted through to being bowled out for 445. They went off for rain and came back on. Alex Carey was 70 not out. 70, he was the last player out. Mitchell Starc was dismissed for 14. Nathan Lyon for 2. There was a lot of criticism that maybe Australia batted on too long today, chewed up too many balls. And I have to agree. I think that it was a little strange the way they batted. Nathan Lyon scored 2 off 30 balls, just chewed up, 5 overs there. So I thought that was probably a misstep. But I think maybe Pat Cummins was trying to get a really big score so he can enforce the follow on, thinking if we get sort of close to the 450, 500, that gives us a better chance. But still, I don't know what Lyon was doing. Maybe he was just sticking with Carey. Carey was at the other end. I'm just going to let him go. But the whole thing dragged on, and we saw later on how little time they got. Australia probably should have been bowling first thing today.
I agree with you, Manners. The Lion innings was curious. The bits that I kind of picked up on, I understood, I think, somewhat the tactic in Lion, just trying to sort of see off maybe the rest of an over and let Carey come back onto strike. But it felt like he was knocking back to the bowler some opportunities to score, some half volleys, at least balls in his area, at least where we know he likes to attack. I know saying that as a number 10, if you said that about a number 10 20 years ago, you'd probably be called crazy. But he has enough quality with the bat to help tick things along with Carey. And it wasn't as if the bowling was particularly menacing at that point. It wasn't as if he was being beaten all ends up by the bowling that was dished up. And to see them sort of 450, I think, was the target. And I think Patrick was keen to call them in after that, only to, for Carey to be bowled out. Anyway, Starc, again, probably could have gone a little bit harder. There was a bit more intent there than mine, as you can see by the scorecard. But, yeah, it might just be that sort of 20 minutes they'll be leaving to sort of rue not having that opportunity to bowl a couple more overs in that situation. I know they were able to take early wickets when they came back out, but you never know. In the next couple of days, that 15 minutes or so could be vital in how the rest of the test goes. Whether or not they would have just taken a session end at that point anyway, I'm not too sure. I can't remember exactly what the time frame was like at that particular stage, but yeah, and what the weather was doing at that particular time too. But yeah, I thought it was a little bit disappointing that they just didn't provide a little bit more impetus towards the end through Lyon's innings. I don't think he got off the mark in the first 18 balls of his innings there.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, that was a little bit strange.
So it chewed up a bit of time. Australia finished on 445. Jasper Bumrah finished with 6 for 76. Siraj 2 for 97. Deep 1 for 95. Reddy 1 for 65. The two heroes for Australia, Travis Head's 152, Steve Smith's 101, and Carey with a good 70 at the end there, and got Australia to a good score. But then it was just stop start for the rest of the day. India only faced 17 overs. They did that over about 5 different little sessions, but Australia wreaked havoc, dismissing Jaiswal, Gill, Kohli, and Pant. They were 1 for 4, 2 for 6, 3 for 22, and then 4 for 44. Mitchell Starc took 2 wickets. Hazelwood 1, Cummins 1. Australia looked very, very good. And I guess Australia's best chance now of winning this game is to try and make India follow on. Just bowl for the rest of the test match, knowing that they'll be on and off. There's a lot of rain forecast, and just hope that there's enough time for them to take 16 more wickets. I think it's very unlikely, but we can really see now that this Australian pace attack is humming. Let's start with the first dismissal. Jaiswal, first ball, edges 1 through slips for 4, sort of wide of third slip, the way he got out in the first test. Then next ball, and this is great captaincy, he just whipped one straight off his toes to mid-wicket, and he was caught, second ball of the innings. That was phenomenal for them to have a fielder right there for that shot.
Yeah, I think it's also probably the point that I want to make is that I think Jaiswal's probably got Mitchell Starc in his head a little bit. Normally I think facing anyone else and a ball on his sort of toes on that leg stump line, he's whipping through for 4 along the ground. And in the end, he's kind of caught between two minds and he just sort of chips one straight to Mitchell Marsh. Yeah, you could say the field placement's good, but I've got questions on the shot. That's 3 times in 5 innings now that Starc has Jaiswal. So that's a big I think talking point for the rest of the series, that matchup is one that Australia should really harness and focus on. And you're going to get it at the start of the innings for the rest of the series now anyway. So, and as we know, Mitchell Starc has a knack of taking a wicket inside the first 10 balls of his spell. Sometimes it's the first ball of his spell. And okay, when Jaspal gets going and he makes a start, he goes on and makes big scores. We know that to be true. But if he's going to fail, say 3 or 4 times out of 5 to begin the Test summer, then that's a massive tick for Australia almost every single time. Pound for pound, batter by batter, Australia is still winning that individual contest when you put the openers against the openers, the middle order against the middle order. I know maybe that first Test would probably put the openers in the ascendancy on the Indian side, perhaps, but for the rest of the series, look, I think especially in the middle order, Australia are well and truly ahead in this series. Gill, Kohli, Pant, their dismissals today, we'll probably get into them a little bit more. Kohli looked poor. Pant nicking off as well.
Jaiswal's got to find a way to get through the first few overs because we saw in the first Test how good he is when he gets his eye in. He makes the game look easy. But at the moment, just in that, as you say, that first little period where the ball's really swinging around, he's got to come up with a method to get through that first little period against Starc because, as you say, otherwise Australia's going to expose that for the rest of the series.
And how much do we talk about that with younger players coming through? No matter what format it is, it's definitely a generational thing. And look, there's positives to that, especially on the white ball side of things. But if you're Yashasi Jaspal and you know that once you get to 20 and you face 50 balls, you're indestructible, then there's got to be a case of you. Again, you've got to be positive, even in your defense. But there's got to be a case of knowing when to leave the ball alone. And that ball, again, to Mitchell Marsh is almost him caught in two minds, not really knowing when he wants to go and when he wants to defend. He needs to do
what Greg Chappell used to say, just play in the V for your first 15 or 20 runs. That's it.
Or what Boyks used to say, the best place to play a new ball, man, is down the other end.
I like that. The next to go was Shubman Gill. A fantastic catch by Mitchell Marsh at second gully. I think there was 2 gullies in there, and he took a terrific catch, diving away to his left, caught it behind him, and that had India 2 for 6. And I don't know if you saw Mitchell Marsh's celebrations for both of those catches, but he was pretty up and about, did the little running man. So I love that one. And that really set Australia off. So India are 2 for 6. Again, Gill's a worry. Gill's a concern. So, he only came back in the last Test match, but he needs to fire. Virat Kohli. And this is a magnificent passage of play for Australia. This is Australia at its best. Rahul's on strike, hits one down to, I think, third somewhere. Mitchell Starc runs around, dives, stops the ball going for 4. It means Kohli's on strike for the next ball rather than Rahul. Hazelwood comes in. Beautiful delivery, outside off, full, tempting Kohli into the drive, and he just feathers it through to Alex Carey. Kohli's gone for 8, India are 3 for 22. Fantastic stuff from Australia, but that was a terrible dismissal from Kohli. There's no reason to be playing at those deliveries. That is under 15 stuff. Let's just throw up a half volley and hope he goes for it. Someone who's scored 30 Test centuries, you sides 2 down. That was poor stuff.
Yeah, and we put him obviously in the same conversation as Root, Williamson, and Smith. And if you were to ask yourself how many of those 4 are getting out to that particular ball, maybe a shaky Smith at the start of his innings. But outside of that, the other 2 players there are not playing that shot. And I thought that maybe after the 100 that he scored early in the series, he might have just sort of reined it in a little bit, but it's almost gone the other way now where, I need to attack. I'm not sure if he just doesn't have any confidence in the rest of the batting order, and he feels like he needs to sort of get on the front foot and kind of be the big figure of India's batting lineup. But it's just so questionable. It's like a 7th stump line, and it's not a half volley. He does get into a bit of a strange position where his bat's neither vertical or horizontal, and if you're the slip cord and you're waiting every single ball, he's always going to give you a chance. And on a day like today where the ball's doing a little bit, you're coming on and off the ground, as an Australian fielding side, it could have been quite easy just not to always be kind of switched on at every single moment. And for Kohli, just having that lapse of concentration just sways the momentum back into Australia's favour. And even if Australia don't go on and win the test match, they can still bank on the dismissals here in Brisbane and say, look, we've got Kohli kind of where we want to again, even after that Perth 100 that he scored. So
yeah, they're inflicting scars now on this Indian top order. There's no doubt about it, because you look at every innings apart from that second innings in Perth, they just haven't been able to get away.
And you've got to think too that even from this test perspective, the Australian bowlers are far fresher than what India's attack looks like. Siraj looks like he's carrying, well, we don't quite know what it is, but he is carrying some sort of knock. Boomer hasn't quite looked 100%, even going back to the previous test match. Whereas Australia, you have, Scott Boland waiting in the wings for Melbourne if we absolutely need him to. He probably could have played in Brisbane had Hazelwood not been fit. Well, he definitely would have, just been thrown straight in. So, look, I think the best, even if Australia don't win this test match, as we've already said, if we knock India off quickly and then have another dob at them again, enforcing the follow on, just to kind of, as you say, just plant some more seeds of doubt into this India top order. Who knows what happens in Melbourne and Sydney?
Yeah. But if they get away with this one, they might be boosted. Anyway, just last thing before we wrap up today. So the last play to go, very unlucky, Rishabh Pant. They came out, I think this was just before tea. I mean, bear in mind, they were moving the breaks around all day with the constant rain breaks. But I think they came out for literally about 17 balls before tea. And Rishabh Pant gets a feather off Alex Carey off a Pat Cummins thunderbolt. And so that got another vital wicket for Australia. Pant goes. Australia have India 4 for 44. And then just at around 5 o'clock local time in Brisbane, they came out for about an over or two. They bowled one over of Stark. The umpire said it's too dark. Lyon and Head bowled an over each, I think. And then the umpires deemed it was getting too dark for any play. So they called it off. India 4 for 51, Rahul 33 not out. My issue with Rishabh Pant is, Daniel, I think he's obviously a very good player. I feel he's batting at least one spot too high at 5. He's only got one way to play, which is, it's even more extreme than Travis Head. It's just, I'm going to flog these bowlers and that's it, which I like. Everybody likes Rishabh. He's a great player, but I think he would be better suited to a 6 or 7 when there's a bit more of a foundation laid. I don't think coming in at 3 down, I just think it's too soon. I think he's a natural 6.
I'm glad you draw the comparison to Head, because I think you're right. There's a little bit more nuance, I think, to Travis Head's game defensively. And I find that Pant, actually, when he defends, sometimes it's actually a little bit of a weakness for him. You would almost prefer him to go a little bit more. But when as you say, when you're thrown in at 3 for not many, because he doesn't quite have that little element in his game, it means that he can actually compound the problem a little bit further. I think when he first came out here on one of the last, well, it would have been 2 tours ago, right? When he came out the first time, it kind of caught Australia in a little bit of a surprise, but he was batting, I feel like he was batting a little bit further down. I could be wrong. And it was a nice little counter punch, a la what Alex Carey is capable, in doing. But he's not quite an Alex Carey and he's not quite a Travis Head. And at 5, there's just a little bit more pressure on him to ensure that he can sort of not worry about the scoreboard, not play to what the scoreboard says, and just go about his business. For Travis Head, he remains positive even in defense, where I feel like sometimes Pant defensively, because he does get a little bit tentative and he is so bottom-handed dominant and he's got such hard hands. If he nicks one, it's always carrying once defending. Whereas I think even sometimes when Travis Head defends, he is able to kind of have that the soft hand backlift, and it does seem to go down into the slip cordon and avoid the catch in the gully. But yeah, there's just a little bit more nuance to Travis's game in comparison. I think you're right.
Even at Adelaide, Travis Head took a while to get going. He made sure he got to know the pace of the pitch, worn the bowlers down a bit. So he's got a few gears for Travis Head. So that leaves the test match, India trailing by 394 runs. The forecast for the next 2 days, maybe even more rain than we got on day 3. So at this stage, as I said at the top of the show, I think weather will be the winner, and I think India will get out of jail free here, and then they get to go to the Melbourne Cricket Ground, a ground they've had great success, and the SCG, where they are spin friendly. So that's, I guess, probably the major frustration with Pat Cummins not declaring earlier is that Australia are effectively behind in the series. India hold the trophy. It's 1-1. If it stays like this for the rest of the series, India go home with the trophy. So I think the onus is on Australia to really try and win every game they can, because India can just sit back and hope once they get to better grounds they can compete a bit more. Daniel, what do you think? Draw?
Yeah, I think so, and I think your point is well made. I think there might be questions in hindsight if they were to potentially have dobbed India in yesterday evening. I think that might come back to haunt them a little bit. I mean, hindsight's 2020 and all that. I'd still think that there was probably enough known about the inclement weather over the course of the last 3 days of this test match where you wanted to just say, look, let's stop them in. We need a win here more than India do. And I don't think it's what India would have wanted in that situation. Does it change? What would they have been in this scenario had they done that? Might they have been, say,
6 or 7
they
down?
could have been 6 or 7 down potentially. And then you've got hopefully, let's say a day across the last 2 days of inclement weather, of the chance to take, say, 13 wickets in across maybe 80 to 90 overs across the next 2 days. It's hard to say. I mean, I probably would have, but that's very easy for me sitting up here and, in front of a microphone and a chair and not at the Gabba. So look, I don't think we should hold it against him. I think maybe if we were a little bit more aggressive, Michael Clarke might have done it in comparison, looking back to the test days of old. But hindsight's a beautiful thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. All right, Daniel, well, thanks for joining me. You can find him at the Emerging Cricket Podcast. Make sure you subscribe. In fact, if you subscribe to the Emerging Cricket Podcast and you listen to Cricket Unfiltered, you basically know the whole cricket world. You know what's going on in Div 8, and you know what's going on in the World Test Championship. So you have all your bases covered. Remember, you can rate and review Cricket Unfiltered on whatever app you listen to. Got a really negative review saying I'm too negative towards the Australian team recently. Don't care. I'm going to continue to say what I feel. But yeah, rate and review the show on whatever app you want, and I'll be back at the end of day 4.